today, as I said from last time, we're going to have this gigantic demo, and it's all demo. And these are all the things. You can go look at this later and make sure that you remember me saying these things. But before I even do that, I'm going to show you, and I don't like to do this because I don't want to stifle your creativity. I'm going to show you a little bit of what your A6 is supposed to look like. This is not a required task that I'm showing you. It's a hint, just so that you have an idea of it before we go do the lecture today, which is going to cover a lot of the stuff you're going to do. Here is one possible implementation of your A6. So A6 is all about the themes for Memrise. It's not about the game anymore. You've already done the game. You're going to use the same game from A2 in this. I'm not going to change it. But it's about the themes, managing themes. So in A1 and A2, like you choose random themes or whatever. Here you're going to not only pick the theme, you're going to be able to edit the theme. Okay, and have multiple themes. So here you can say I have my themes: Halloween, flags, vehicles, places, whatever. And I can delete them. I can swipe to delete them. I can swipe the other way and edit them. So here I'm picking the emojis I want to be in here. I can pick the color I want in my theme. I can pick how many cards are in the theme here. And when I edit these things and go back, it's updated here. And when I click on one, yeah, it shows me a game and I can play the game here. But this is not the important part. This is just your A1, A2. You're not going to change that much. The real key is out here with the themes. And you can add a new theme. Okay, this is a new theme, and then maybe you want to edit this new theme to change your emojis or whatever. And so this is what you're going to be trying to build, and this does a lot of things that you don't know how to do, like put up another window on screen and all that stuff. And so we're going to learn about all that stuff today. And again, you don't have to do it this way. The first thing I'm going to do today, the same thing I did last time. It's funny, I guess that's getting to be a habit. I'm going to do a little fun thing first, which is in our app over here, we have this nice little menu down here. And this menu down here, this context menu, this is where we're going to spend all our time today, adding things, doing things. First thing I'm going to do is add a menu item here, which lets me go to and bring up another menu item, any of the palettes. So I can jump right to a palette. So it's like a little go-to menu. How do we do that? Well, to go to something, we have to create another little sub-menu, which is going to have a list of all our palettes in that. So let's do that. Here we are in our chooser. This is where we have our context menu. It has these two things. I'm going to create a little private var here. I'm going to call it my go-to menu. And it's just going to be some view. It could actually also be some menu, because it is going to be a menu, but a menu is a view. I'm going to say some view here. And I'm going to create a submenu by using the menu, SwiftUI view. It's called menu. And inside there, you just put buttons. And that's how you make a menu. It couldn't be more straightforward. And in fact, in my menu, I'm going to create one for each of my store's palettes, like this. And of course, palette in. And I'm going to use my animated action button, the same action button I've been using up here. I'm going to use those in my little go-to menu. Put the palette name, and we'll have to do something when it's clicked. Then it needs a label, this menu. So this is going to be the thing that's in our main menu, right? The same menu that has new and delete. It needs a little label in here, and I'm going to have my label be go-to. I'm just going to use a system image. I looked around for one. I found this one, text.insert. Kind of seems like it looked good. Let's put it inside this context menu. Go to menu. So we've added a menu as a submenu to this one. Now we'll run. And there it is, go to. And see, when we go to it, we get this submenu. And we can say, oh, let's go to the music one. Now, we didn't put any code to do anything, but this is what the UI looks like. Everyone understand what we built? All right, what do we do? How are we going to go to the one that was chosen? Well, a little tricky here. We're going to have to do that if let index equal the store's palettes first index where $0.ID equals this palette's ID. So we essentially have to look up and find the index of this thing in our store, because what we're going to do is say store, set your cursor index to that index. Remember, the cursor index is the one that's showing. So we need to set the one that's showing to be that index there. And we have to use double equals instead of single equals. Everyone cool with this little piece of code right there? All right, let's run, see if that works. There we go. Go to, and animals. Yeah. Go to weather. Woohoo. Okay, so that's how you do a submenu. And context menus is really nice to be able to have submenus. Keeps your main context menus maybe a little smaller and more accessible. But so I throw that in there. Not really relevant necessarily to all we're doing, but it seemed like a good place to show that to you. Now to the heart of the matter of what we're doing today. We're going to start by building a user interface for editing our palettes, changing the name of the palette, adding and removing emoji, just like you saw you're going to have to do for your themes and Memrise. How are we going to do that here? Well, we're going to do it for our palettes. I'm going to have this UI be accessible by having an animated action button in my menu called Edit. And what is the system image that I found for that? Oh yeah, pencil. Okay, pencil, and it's definitely not destructive. And we don't remove something. Instead, we need to show another whole window. A whole nother view needs to pop up. Well, I'm going to talk about how we do it first, and then we'll come back and make it happen here. The way we present another view on top of us is with .sheet. So .sheet has an argument is presented. And is presented is a Boolean value whether this sheet should be showing on the screen right now. Very simple, that's what I call is presented. But what's really interesting about this is that it's a binding to that Boolean. And I'm going to call it show palette editor because that's what it does. And this binding to show palette editor is used both directions. That Boolean gets set to true by us when we want it to appear, and when the user dismisses it, it gets set back to false by the sheet view modifier. So you see how it's going both ways. That show palette editor is both used for us to present it and to tell us when it stopped being presented. We just need it to be a little local @state, private var, show palette editor. And we'll start it out as false because we don't want to start out with this thing visible clearly. And all we need to do down here when we want to present it is just set this show palette editor equal to true. As soon as we set that to true, this sheet is going to see that that's true and it's going to present this view. And that's what this curly brace is. It's a view builder that makes the view to put there. I'm going to put in here a view called palette editor. We're going to create that in another file. So file, new, file. It's a Swift UI view. It's called palette editor. I'm going to make sure I'm putting it in the right place, of course. Palette editor. All right, so we get our palette editor. Let's move it down here. And we'll start out with this palette editor saying something like palette editor so that we know which view it is. It's a normal view. This view is eventually going to have a whole bunch of stuff for editing a palette, just like, again, your Memrise one's going to have choosing a color and all that. It's all going to be in there. We're going to get to it, but we're going to start with just palette editor. So let's see. Let's go back and see our code over here. This is the code that when it's presented, it's going to present this palette editor. Let's run and see what this looks like. Down here, we added this edit. There it is with the pencil. Ready? Do it. Woo! It appeared, and there it is, the text that we had there, palette editor. So we're just going to fill this in with the implementation of our palette editor. But before I do that, I actually want to show you another way you can put something up on screen, which is a popover. Kind of like a sheet, but it's not so huge. It doesn't cover up the whole thing. And very importantly, it points to whatever it's modifying or whatever the context is. So if you have something that's very context specific, like it wants to point at the button that brought it up or some piece of text, you can use a popover. It looks just like sheet, except for you're going to put it on the view you want it to point to. So here I'm going to make this a popover, and I'm going to have it point to the chooser button that brought it up by attaching this popover to it. So let's see what that looks like. There we go. Down here, edit, palette editor, and it's maybe hard to see, but there's actually a little arrow pointing to it. Now it looks terrible, it's all jammed in there, but there's no reason we can't put some padding in there. And in fact, more than just putting padding, if we want to make sure that this thing is big enough at some minimum size, we can enforce that and just go back to our palette editor and say that this text has to have a frame, which is a min width of, let's say, 300 and a min height of 350. And we talked about the frame view modifier. It's got a whole bunch of things on there like width and height, just pick the width and height, but it also has minimum width and height to just say, well, you can be what size you want, but please be at least this big. And if I put that in there and run, now when I do this edit, see, it's minimum size, more room to maneuver in there and to make it look a little nicer. Now, remember that this popover points to whatever view you put it on. So let's say, what if we put it on this one instead? Now it's pointing to this one, this other view. Both the popovers and sheets, they're what's called modal presentations. They put this view palette editor up and they're asking the user to deal with this right now. Don't do anything else. Don't scroll in your emojis. Don't deal with this. And when you're done, dismiss it. And now you can go back and do something. So that's modal presentation. And modal presentation, you don't want to overuse it in your app. You don't want to be constantly putting in a user in a state where it's like, they have to deal with this or else. It makes more sense when you have like an editor. Like you want to edit the theme. Well, that's what the user asked to do. So let's do it right now, and then we'll get back to doing what we were doing before. I say this because some people will build their whole apps with just modal presentation after modal presentation, and they don't understand that the user sometimes changes their mind and they want to go do something else and they want to be able to navigate. So try to not overuse modal presentation like this. And I'm going to put this popover back as a sheet because this is a big enough UI. Probably not going to put it in a popover. Well, it's close. It's close to being one we could put in there. The thing about it for popover is there's also really nothing it really needs to point at. There's no reason for it to point at the chooser button. There's no reason for it. You could argue it should point at the palette since it's editing that palette. It's probably a design choice thing. All right, so we know about popovers now. We know about how to set the size. We got the sheet. Let's start building our palette editor and see what it would actually look like. So it's not just a text like this. It's probably something like, let's say, a V-stack. I'm going to align it leading. I'm going to put in there the palette's name. And I'm doing something that I'm often doing in this class, but I'm just typing what I want to type here. And I'll go fix all the errors that come up later. And that's part of doing declarative programming. You just can say what you want it to do, remove emojis. What I want my editor to basically have is a way to edit the text of the name, then a way to add some emojis to my palette, and then a way to remove emojis. I'm just kind of typing what I want here. So let's get rid of some of these errors. The first one is cannot find palette in scope. Well, obviously, if we're going to have palette editor, we have to pass it a palette to edit. So I'm going to just do that up here. Let's say let palette be palette that we want to edit. And what else we got here? Remove emojis. All right, we need some sort of UI to remove emojis. So I actually worked on that before we came here just to speed things up. I just made a little lazy V grid. See it right here? It has all the palettes emojis in there. I uniqued them and turned them into strings like we did in the other place. And it just shows them. And we're going to eventually make it so that you have an on tap gesture. When you tap on it, it removes the emoji. It's not we haven't done that yet, but so far we just have this. And this has caused some problems also because I added this palette that you have to provide to edit. And of course the preview wants it now. For now, I'm going to comment the preview out so we don't have to deal with that. But I am going to have to go back to my palette chooser right here where I'm doing the palette editing and actually provide the palette. So what palette are we editing back in here? Well, we're editing our stores palettes store.cursor index, because when we say edit, that little pencil thing, we mean edit the currently showing one, the one at the cursor. Let's go look, see what happens here, see what our cool palette editor looks like. Vehicles, we're going to edit vehicles here. Oh, there it is. Well, not bad. Okay, we can kind of see it taking shape here. It doesn't look anywhere near as nice as what we saw with the memorized one. But I've got my tap to remove emojis is nice, a little instruction that I put there. And then hopefully I can click here and edit this and type some emojis and add them. And then of course I want to be able to change the name of the thing. Now, how do I make this look a lot nicer with one line of code? We know in Swift UI we can always use one line of code and makes this a lot better. Well, here we really could do it. I'm going to go back here, and in our palette editor, this VStack, instead I'm going to make it a form. So form is an extremely powerful VStack-like thing for when you want to collect information from the user. And it's used all over the place in Swift and in iOS in general, like the settings app, form after form after form in the settings app. And that's what you saw in Memrise. So just that one change, just changing that one thing, look what that does to our UI here. Organized it nicely, put some lines in between, put the little gray background on it, etc. So you can see why you're going to use form anytime you have to do something like this. Get some information from the user, toggled information or text or whatever, you're going to do something using a form. Form really, really powerful and really important. You can see forms all the time. And we can do more with the form. The form has a lot of features in it. You're going to have to read its documentation. I'm going to cover them all today. I got so much to cover today. But I'm going to show you one thing in forms, which is you can divide the stuff in the form up in sections. We have two obvious sections here. One is the name at the top. Section has a header. You can put any view you want here, but I'm going to have just simple text. This is name. That's this one. And then there's another section here for the emojis. So this is header. Call this my emojis section. It's got both of these emojis things in there. Let's go see what it does to add the section there. All right, see, it put a little header, the emojis header in there. Now, we got a problem here, actually. This doesn't look that great. All those fonts are huge, and that actually works nice for a demo, but why are those fonts so big? If you use iOS all the time, you don't see fonts like that. Well, that's because we set the font of this thing to be big, because we wanted it to be big for the user to drag these emojis out. When we presented the sheet, it got that font passed on down to it. And we didn't want that. We do not want this to have that. So how do we stop a font once we go to another sheet or some other UI? We don't want it anymore. We can do that with font nil. So I'm going to go back to my palette chooser here. Here's where I put my palette editor up, and I'm going to say font nil. In other words, go back to whatever the default is. Stop using whatever somebody set on me. That's going to make a big difference here. Gotten small again. This is a kind of normal size. Now these are too small. I want, especially the tap to remove emojis, I want it to be larger there. And I also want the font of add emojis here to be the same size as the font for the emojis that I'm removing. I want them to kind of match. So I'm going to go back and actually set that font separately. Back to my palette editor here. Let's create a little private let emoji font, I'll call it. And it's going to be a font, system font size, let's say 40, whatever size we really want there. And I'm going to put this emoji font on all the places I want it, which is to say I want it here in my remove emojis. And I also want it on this little add emojis here. All right, that looks better. All right, next thing, most important thing, I want to be able to edit the title and also to add the emoji. So how do I take that text field that we have up here and make it an editable text field? Well, editable text fields in Swift are different views than text. They're called, instead of text, text field. And a text field has two arguments. One of them is kind of a placeholder or a word that can be used to help the user understand what we're asking for here, a label if you want to think of it that way. And then a second argument called text, which is the actual text that's being edited inside this text field. Now this is yet another, this is our second binding. If you think about what's going on here, we have our text field, says vehicles in it. We want to be able to pass in the initial value of it, vehicles, and whenever it changes, we want to know about it. And the way we're going to do that is by creating a single source of truth for that text. And the way we're going to do that is with a binding. Specifically, this argument to a text field is a binding. The text field knows that it doesn't want to hold a copy of what's being edited. It wants to edit that thing directly. So it's asking you to give a binding to that source of truth. Well, what is the source of truth for this palette.name? It's in our view model, our palette store. So we need to give our text field here a binding all the way back to our view model. To do that, we need a binding to the palette we've been given to edit at the top of our palette editor view here. By making this var a @ binding, we are forcing whoever creates this palette editor to give us a binding to the source of truth for this palette. Now, anytime we reference this palette anywhere in our code here in the palette editor, we'll actually be referencing the palette back in the view model. And we can also use this binding to pass a binding to the name into our text field. That's because $, the $sign projected value of a binding is another binding to that binding. So $palette.name here means a binding to this palette, which is going to be bound all the way back to our view model. Now our text field will be editing the palette name directly in the view model. You can see these $signs, these bindings are flowing through our view system. So now back in our palette chooser, you can see we're getting an error here because this is supposed to be a binding to the truth. Not here I'm passing the truth, and so this is value type programming, so it copies the truth. I don't want to copy the truth. I want a binding to it, and I can get it here by saying $sign here because this store is an environment object. And the binding, the $sign, the projected value of an environment object, just like an observed object, is a binding to that store or that view model's variables, including its palettes, right? Our palette store has a var called palettes. It's a computed var even, but we can bind right into it. In fact, look, I'm even binding to a certain element of that array. You can bind all the way down through. So I've created a binding to this source of truth. This is the source of truth. I'm going to pass that binding to my editor. Now everything that my editor does with that palette is going to be changing it in the source. Not changing it local or anything. Back in that source, it's actually being changed. Let's go back to our editor and look here. While we run, we edit. Now it says vehicles because it's showing you what's in the model. And watch this. If I go now and change this to travel, look what's happening even as I'm deleting. You see, it's changing it in the model. You can see it down there, travel, right? We are directly editing this thing in the model. There's a single source of truth for it. Let's also bind our little add emojis here. But the interesting thing about add emojis here is that's not actually in my palette. This is a text field, this add emoji here. When I type it, it should add it to my palette.emojis. It's not replacing my palette.emojis. I didn't pick a UI which is type your emojis here. It's add these emojis and then click here to remove. So I didn't quite match my UI to what my representation in my view model is, which is perfectly fine. So in this case, we're going to have the source of truth for add emojis here be a local @ state. But every time the @ state changes, I'm going to update my model by adding the emojis. Let's see what that looks like. So here's add emojis. Make it a text field. I like add emojis here as the prompt. And the text is going to be emojis to add, essentially. We'll go up here and create an @ state, private var, emojis to add. It's a string. It'll start out as no emojis to add. And literally, I'm just going to say right after this, on change of emojis to add, and it gives me back the new version of the emojis to add. Now, I'm going to add those emojis powerfully here. I'm going to put the new emojis at the beginning of the list, assuming that they're new and we want them there. I'm also going to unique them. I'm also going to strip out anything that's not an emoji. So if you go into add emojis here and you type hello, it's not going to put hello down there or eight. It's going to be just emojis. So emojis only. Now I could imagine one day maybe where I do want words and stuff in my palettes down there, but not today. Emojis only in this course. So I'm going to say palette.emojis equal, and that's an important statement right there. When I say palette.emojis equal, I'm talking about the palette in the view model. I'm changing the view model right here because I have a binding all the way back. So that's going to change the view model directly. I'm going to say my emojis to add plus the emojis I already have. And I'm going to filter them by making sure they're only emojis. Now, this is emoji. I'll talk about that in a second. And I'm also going to unique them. We already know about uniqued. Is emoji is not something that's in Swift. I actually wrote that function. It's in my extensions. It's not a perfect emoji test, but it's pretty good. It catches most emojis. But bottom line is, I only want emojis here. So everyone got what I did. I took the emojis to add, and I am adding them to the palette I have, and I'm uniquing them. Let's see what that looks like. This is travel. Let's go look to it in our emojis. We have travel here somewhere. Where is travel? There it is. Okay, maybe add a couple of ships. Now, notice that I actually double click, type. That's okay because it uniques them. It only adds one. And see how it's adding it to the front of the list of emojis? This list of emojis to remove, that's coming straight out of the model. So as I'm adding to the model, it's just updating automatically. You're starting to get the picture here that by binding everything, everything just works. Everything is, you add things to your model and they show up. They show up not only up there, look, they show up here. You see? Travel, I just added those ships. What about removing emoji? Let's do the tap to remove. We'll go down here and see that our travel has added our ships that we added there. And of course, our palette thing is completely persistent. So every time we quit and come back, it's all still there. Removing emojis, real easy. Down here on tap gesture, I'm going to do it with animation. I want them to nicely animate. I'm just going to say my palette.emojis.remove emoji.first. It should be a single emoji string, but I'm going to say first to get the first thing out of it, which it's only one thing in the string, so it will be the thing. And remove is another function I wrote just to make this simpler. I'm also going to remove it out of the emojis to add too, because if you removed it, you probably don't want it anymore. So that removed it out of both of them. Let's see what this looks like. Again, when I say palette.emojis.remove, I'm modifying the model. There's our travel, got our boats. Here we go. Let's remove the boats. We don't want the boats. See, removing them. And if we went back here and we say, and I did want that boat. I can't even see which ones are boats. There we go. There's a boat. Put it back. And then, actually don't want it. It removed them from there. Now, this is not a great UI for adding or removing emojis. Okay, I picked this UI because I wanted to show you how we're updating the model all over the place in there, and it's just updating everywhere. And this is the fundamental part in this whole declarative approach, is that there's a single source of truth, and if you edit that source of truth, then it just shows up in the UI. It doesn't require a lot of extra, messing around to have it happen. I'm going to do one other thing while I'm here, unrelated to all this cool binding and all that stuff, which is when we first appear, when I bring this up and edit, nothing's editable. No keyboard comes up. It didn't pick either of the two things to edit, but it should. It's like, why wouldn't it just pick the add emojis here so that I can just immediately start typing? But let's talk a little about how you make the keyboard come up. It's not how you would think. It's not like a view modifier on text. Oh, by the way, if you search for view modifiers that start with .text, you'll find a lot of them. There's a lot of ways you can customize your text field. Auto capitalization, auto correction, when you type and it's correcting your words annoyingly, you can make it do that or not. All that stuff, .text view modifiers. We're not going to cover them, but just look up that in the documentation. So how can I make it so that it puts the focus on there and brings that keyboard up? And that's done with something called focus. And here's how it works. Kind of interesting. We're going to create a new kind of @ thing called @ focus state. And focus state is a thing that's used to keep track of which of the text fields has the focus of the keyboard. So you make it a private var. Oftentimes this is a bool because you'll only have one text field and it's either focused or not. But we have two text fields. So I'm going to make my focused be my own little enum. So let's create an enum focused, and it's going to have the name or the add emojis. Those are the two things that can be focused. And so my focus is going to be a focused, and it has to be optional because neither of them might be focused. In fact, that's the case now. When it comes up, neither of them have the focus, so there's no keyboard. And this is going to be used with a binding as well, because we need to be able to tell it which one we want to be focused, but the user could click on the other one, and then it needs to tell us that it's the other one. So we're going to have binding here. That works like this: dot focused, and you give it a binding to these little focus state thing like that, and you tell it here which one this one is, which is name. We're going to do the exact same thing down here. Dot focused, use the focus thing, equals, in this case, dot add emojis. You see how I'm just, by using this little modifier, I'm just telling the system which thing to set to what when this thing becomes the focus, and vice versa. If someone sets this focused equal to this, then this will become the focus. It'll get the blinking cursor and the keyboard will come up. And once I have this mechanism, now I can do something really fun. I can say, when I appear, if my palette's name is empty, then focus my palette's name. Otherwise, focus the add emojis. See, so now when my palette editor appears, I'm going to pick which one of those. If I have no name, then I'm going to make the name be editable. But if I have a name, then I'm going to do the add emojis. Let's see this go. Whoop, keyboard comes up, add emojis, because we have a name, travel, so it's good to go. Now, this would really be cool when we create a new emoji. I'm talking about down here when we say new. Right now it adds math. What if it created an empty one and put that editor up on it? Let's do that. All right, so here we go. Here's our new. Instead of having new do math, I'll have new do nothingness, no emojis. And I'm going to say show palette editor equals true. Because we built good primitives here, it's real easy to go here and say, give me a new one. It's blank. And look what it picked, the name. Because I had that little focus thing, there's no name, so it picked it. Maybe I would say, oh, I want blue emojis here. Go down here, pick blue ones. There's a blue one, blue, blue, pick things that are blue. Now I have a new one here, blue. We punted over here in our palette editor on our preview. Why did we punt there? Well, because it had to have an argument, and now it's especially tricky because the argument is a binding. How in my preview am I going to test my preview out and have a binding that is really like, there's no way to do it, right? Where do I put the binding here? Well, I'm going to show you a really cool thing you can do with previews in general that really works nicely for bindings, which is that you can make your own view for the preview. Right in line here, I'm going to say struct my preview. It's a view. It has a var body, which is some view. And this var body is going to be a palette editor. And this thing needs some binding to its palette. Oh, no problem. We can just say @state private var, the palette. I can even give it an initial value. Let's say something like make a palette store on the fly here named preview. And let's get its palettes. And maybe we'll just grab the first one. And we know that the palettes can't be empty. So we'll just exclamation point to unwrap it. And now we can pass a binding to that palette. And now down here in our previews, we just put one of these views, a preview view. I wanted to preview this palette editor, so I need something to edit. So I created a view that has @state, and then I passed a binding to that @state, and I'm just showing this view. Your previews don't always have to just be the thing that you're previewing. They could be some other view that shows the thing that you're previewing, which is what I'm doing here. Another thing we could have done here is an @state object with just this palette store. And then we could have done $store.palette. That would have been fine too. Either way, we're creating something we can bind into. Okay, that's it for the palette editor for now. We're going to go away from it. We're going to come back to it. The next thing I want to do is show you some UI to show a list of palettes. We're going to use this list to do a lot of things, navigate around, look at our palettes, edit them eventually, etc. But first, I just want to put a list of palettes up. And I'm going to do that with another animated action button here. This one I'm going to call list, because it's going to be a list of them. And I found this one, list.bullet.rectangle.portrait. You know, it's really fun looking through the SF symbols to try and find symbols. You're like, oh, that's the thing. But I will say that probably there are images you're supposed to use for some of these features. Like new, you're probably always supposed to use a plus, I would say. Maybe I should be better and actually go look, is pencil really what I should use for edit? I think it is. Apple's user interface guide, should really check that out. It'll help you with things like this. But anyway, I thought this one looked like a list of palettes, so I chose it. And here I'm not going to show the palette editor. Instead, I'm going to show a palette list. So this is a new one. Go up here and create another thing called show palette list. But I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to create a sheet with it. Is presented $ show palette list, and this one I'm going to do a palette list. Create another new thing, which is a palette list. Oh, and before I even go over there, I know this one also I'm going to want to do font nil, because I don't want my palette list to inherit my gigantic fonts. This is a SwiftUI view, of course, palette list. Make sure it's in the right place. It is. Palette list. Yeah, it's probably, yeah, we'll leave it right there. It's fine. List of palettes. Let's just do a little VStack here for each. My stores palettes. Palette in. We'll just put the name of the palette. And notice I'm accessing a store. So I'm just going to grab my environment store, the store that's been injected down into all of these things. There's no reason I can't just use that. Let's go look at this. Oh, here's list, right? This new thing. There it is. Nice list of palettes. It looks extremely ugly. This is not what we want. Well, on the other one, we were able to use that really powerful thing, form. Well, there's another one we can use to make this look really good. Anytime we have a list of things, we're going to use a different SwiftUI view called list. See what that looks like. Woo, much nicer lines. And again, the gray background and white. So list, another thing like form, you're going to use a lot. You guys have used iPhones. You see these lists absolutely everywhere. List is also another one. You want to go look in the documentation, .list view modifiers. Mechanisms you can do to make your list look how you want. So definitely go look at the .list view modifiers to make your list look cool. The other thing about list, you can actually combine it with your for each. So if you do list like this, here, you can make it a simple little list. In other words, list has its own built-in kind of for each thing. You can even do the ID self if you want to do that there. Now, we have that list, it's great, but what would be really cool is if we could click on something in the list and have it navigate, slide over, and show us that palette. So we got a list of palettes, click on one, oh, show it to us. Not editing it yet, just show it to us, just so we can see what it looks like. So that clicking on something and have it slide over is called navigation. And we do it everywhere in SwiftUI. You've used iOS apps. you go click them all the time. In fact, let's hop over to our simulator here and run the settings app. And we go to settings and see how we're clicking and navigating around. Now we can hit back buttons to go back, right? This kind of navigating around is fundamental to iOS. Now here we have, it's an iPad, so it's nice. We have a column here and we're navigating here, but even once we're over here, we're still navigating over further, right? And further and further. So we want to be able to do this. Navigate deep down. Really nice when you have a lot of information that's hierarchical. You have your workout schedules and then you click on it and it tells you the day, and then you pick the day and it tells you the kind of workout, and then you click. You see what I'm saying? You're going down in a hierarchical structure. So that's what we're trying to build here. So back in our app, we want to be able to click on this and have it show it to it. And then we're going to put another level too, where we click on one of the emojis and it shows us some detail on that as well. How do we do that? There's really 3 pieces to navigation. First of all, you're usually going to have a list, but you don't have to. You can navigate from anything. The only thing is users are used to navigating from things in lists, right? And I told you it was hierarchical, so usually hierarchical things are in lists, but it doesn't have to be. The first thing you got to do is put it in a navigation stack. So this navigation stack has to be around everything that's happening in the navigation. This is the highest level. This is the container that allows all the navigation to happen. If you don't put a navigation stack around this, then all the other stuff I'm showing you, it just will do nothing. In fact, it'll put errors on the console that says, you tried to navigate and you're not in a navigation stack. Okay, so you got to have that on the outside. The second thing is you have to say what is the thing in the UI that a user can touch on to navigate. So in our case, it's one of the things in the list, this little text right here. If you click on that text, it should navigate. And the way you tell it that is by putting a navigation link around it. So a navigation link takes a view builder, which is just the thing you're going to be clicking on. And it has this other very important argument here called value. The value is the value that SwiftUI is going to associate with clicking on that thing. In our case, it's obvious, a palette. We're clicking on the name of a palette. The palette is what we're associating with. But you can actually associate it with anything. But what's going to happen next is we're going to take that association and then figure out what to navigate to based on what it is. Okay, in this case, the palette. We'll get that in a second, because first we have a problem here. It says this requires that palette conforms to Hashable, which kind of makes sense. If you're going to have the things that's associated with every link be a palette, SwiftUI needs to build a hash table that goes from the palette to the thing you're going to navigate to. So it needs to build a hash table, so it needs to be hashable. Luckily, real easy. We're going to go over to our palettes and make it hashable. Go down here and say hashable. And this is a value type. Magic, it's hashable. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to put any hash functions or whatever. All of our vars are hashable, and so it's hashable. It's the same thing we got with Codable, where it just, as long as all of our vars are that, it can just build it for us automatically. That was really easy. Go back here to our, where are we? Oh, list. Oh, hopefully we fix that. We have. So that's number 2. Okay, navigation stack 1, navigation link 2. The third thing is tell SwiftUI what to do when that value is chosen. When that value that's in that navigation link is chosen, where do we go with it? We do that with navigation destination for what type of thing? In our case, the palettes. What this is saying is when the value of a link is a palette, then this is what to do, the view to show, essentially. So it'll give you that palette back. That's this value that was up here. It's going to give it back to you. And now you have to build a view that will show that palette, and it's going to navigate to it. So here we're going to have a little view. I'm calling it palette view. It takes a palette, shows the palette in the view. And to make it quick, I'm just going to type this in because it's so simple. To my palette view, again, a lazy VGrid that shows the emojis unique as strings. Nothing special there. You guys have seen it all. That's it. 3 things: navigation stack, navigation link, the destination. See this in action. Here's our list. One thing you can see right away, these little chevrons, you see the little things? That's what tells the user, oh, this is a navigation link. If you click on this, it's going to navigate. Now, those don't appear on random views generally, but they're always going to appear if they're in a list. That's another reason to put things that you navigate in a list. Here we go. Travel. Whew, it did it. It's showing us all the things. And look, I have a back button. I can go back. Music. There's the music ones. Back. It's cool. Now, the only thing is, when I clicked and went through here, it showed me the emojis, but I didn't put the name, the COVID name at the top there. I left that out because I want to show you a way that you can put that on. Here I've got a palette view. And if I put inside my palette view that its navigation title is the palette's name, then that's saying anytime this view is the currently showing thing, use this as the title at the top of the navigation stack. That's how the titles work. They're not something you set externally. You attach them to the views that appear. A view appears, it has a navigation title, it'll use it at the top. Let's see what that looks like. And when I click COVID now, ooh, look, I got COVID at the top as a little title of the navigation. And I can do it with this level too. This has no title at the top, right? This navigation thing has no title. Let's give it one. That's back up here. Dot navigation title. And this is basically the name of the store. So let's say /store.name palettes. It's the palettes in that store, right? That's what the top level is. See this in action. Main palettes. And since I gave a title to my root view of the navigation, it's using this large title for it. And now when I navigate in, it'll keep using the large title. So it inherits it essentially from the thing that navigated. The other thing is, notice my back button. It no longer says back. Now it says main palettes because it knows what's there. So when I hit main palettes, it goes back to it. Now, one thing I want to emphasize about navigation title, well, two things really. One is, again, you attach it to the view that is going to be on screen when you want that to be the title. And number two is, you put it inside the navigation stack. Notice I did not put this navigation title outside here on the navigation stack. This would not work because these navigation titles go on the views that are appearing in there. The second thing I want to emphasize is that with these navigation destinations, they don't want to go inside the list. They go outside the list. So don't attach them to this text or to this navigation link or inside of for each. See, it's on this navigation is on the outside of this list because the links are all piling up inside the list. And we're saying, here's the value for this one. And now outside the list, we're saying, here's where to go. The other thing I will say is for kind of nice programming style, put the navigation links and the navigation destinations that go with them close together in the code. Even if it means you have to kind of factor some stuff out, having them close together helps someone reading your code understand what's going to happen here. So notice these two are close together, and then down here, we're going to make another one. We're going to put these close together. This one I'm going to put down here is when I click on the emoji, I'm going to show the emoji really big. Really easy to do. Navigation, link. The value here is the emoji. That's the value I want associated with that being shown. And then outside the for each, even outside this lazy V grid, I'm going to say navigation destination for strings, which is what those emojis are, is just a text of that emoji with a really large font. A couple things to notice here. I put these in here. There's no navigation stack anywhere here. The navigation stack is over somewhere else. And it doesn't have to be here. The navigation stack can be surrounding the whole world. It might be way far away. But these two things are going together. The link and the destination, they're nearby. Even though the destination's outside the lazy V grid, they're close by visually in the code. Let's see what this looks like. All right, we got this. We'll go to sports. Here it is. Let's tap on one of these. Whew, pretty cool. And COVID, this one. It's kind of scary. Notice that the back button here is COVID because we're going back to COVID, and the back button here is main palettes. Next thing I want to do is the same palette list thing, but editable. And I mean seriously editable. Not just we're going to use an editable thing here when we click our palette editor that we have, but also when we're at this list back here, I want to be able to swipe to delete and move them around to a different order, right? Or add a new one. I want to be able to do all that stuff. So this is a fully editable palette list. Let's go make that. I'm going to do it by starting with this same palette list code, but I'm going to copy and paste it because I want it to be something where you can look at them both and see them side by side. The editable one and how it works, and the non-editable one that's very, very similar but doesn't have all the editing features right next to it. So I'm starting with this same thing and start right off the bat having the list be a little more than just the names. I'm going to be a little more like what we saw in Memrise with the themes. I'm going to put the names and the emojis there. So I'm going to turn this little thing into a VStack. We'll do alignment, leading. We'll put the name, and we're also going to put the emojis. However, if it has a ton of emojis, I don't want it to be multiple lines so that every line is a different height. I want them all to just be 2 lines, name and emojis. So I'm going to use a cool little thing called line limit 1, which you can send to a text that says only 1 line. And if it won't fit, then just put ... at the end, which is exactly what I want here. Let's use this instead of using the non-editable one. So I'm going back to my chooser where I say palette list, and I'm saying editable palette list instead. So I'm just picking the different one that I just created right here. We haven't really done anything to make it editable, but we can see it looks kind of cooler. Got more stuff going on in there. And what we want to be able to do here is swipe to delete, and when we tap on it, we want to go to our palette editor. So we're editing the palette, and I want to be able to pick them up and move them around, put them in a different order. So when I cycle through, and I'm going to have a little plus button up at the top that adds a new one. So I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff here. It's going to be surprisingly not as much work as you might think. Let's start with the swipe to delete and moving them around. That is incredibly easy. The only trick to it is we can't do this list like this. We have to break it out into a for each, because for each is the thing that has one little view modifier that does the move and one that does the delete. So you can do it with one line, one view modifier, but only on a for each. It doesn't work on a list. So I'm just going to take my list and break it up into a for each, put it back the way it was essentially. This is inside a list for each. Everyone see what I did there? Just separated them out. And then the for each has a really cool thing called on delete, and it takes what's called an index set. An index set is exactly what it sounds like, a set of indices into the for each's array. And of course, for on delete, it's just going to be one of them, because you can only swipe delete one of them. You can't swipe delete multiple, I don't think. So I'm going to animate this deletion. I'm going to say with animation, store.palettes.remove at offsets those index set. So remove at offsets is just something in array that takes an index set and removes all the things at those indices in one batch. It's like batch remove from an array. That's all we need to do here. The for each is providing us this really nice on delete. We go over here, our list, we swipe, it's gone. And if we swipe just a little, then we get a chance to confirm. So a big swipe deletes it entirely. A smaller swipe lets it delete. And you can cancel, like, no, I don't really want to do it. Now the move is exactly the same, moving things in around in the list, dot on move. And this one, instead of just taking the one index set, it takes an index set and a destination for that, which is new offset in. And again, there's a nice array thing to do this. Palettes dot move from these offsets, the index set, to the offset, new offset. One liner moves things around in the array. It's a batch move, a bunch of indexes gets moved to a new place in the array. And for each, provides this nice UI for this. You just press and hold, and you can drag it around to where you want it. Let go. And watch what happens if I put it at the top. It replaced the thing at the bottom, you see? Because the cursor index at the top. So it's going to replace the cursor index because this becomes the new first thing in the list. What about a plus sign in the upper right to add a new one to this? Also really easy. I'm going to do that using a toolbar. So one thing that's really great about putting things in navigation stacks, and honestly, people sometimes put stuff in navigation stacks just so they get this feature, you can put a toolbar buttons at the top. You can see these toolbar buttons all over the place. UI, and you can put them on other views. They don't have to be in navigation stacks, but it's a real easy way to do it if you have a navigation stack. The way you put a toolbar in there, it looks like this, dot toolbar. And you just put the buttons you want. So here's a button. We'll talk about what it does in a second. And its label is going to be the system name for plus because it's adding. And what do we want to do to add something here? Well, we know how to add a palette, store.insert, an empty palette. Same thing we did with the new button down the context menu. Let's see this in action. See, plus button up there, get add a toolbar, and you can have multiple, that toolbar thing can take multiple buttons up there if you want to have them. I hit plus, and it added it right here at the top. Now, our other new is better because you hit new and it adds it, and then it goes there and navigates to it. So let's do that for this one too. But first, we have to make it so that when we tap on one of these, it doesn't go to this static view, it actually goes to our editor. How do we get this thing to go to our editor? Pretty straightforward, right? Here's the destination when you click on a palette. Instead of going to a palette view, I want to go to a palette editor. But of course, a palette editor takes a binding to a palette because it's going to edit that thing. Now, how are we going to get a binding to a palette here instead of the palette that we just clicked on? Well, I'm going to go look at my store and find the palette there that has the same ID as the one I just clicked on, and pass a binding to it in here. So this is the now very popular little line of code that we do all the time, which is if let index equals store.palettes.first index, where the $0.id equals this palette's ID. Then we can go down here and instead of passing a palette, pass a $store.palettes at that index. So when you want to pass a binding to something, sometimes you have to go look it up, find it somewhere in your view model so that you can $sign it. Because if we just tried to say $palette here, that wouldn't work. This palette is not a state or anything like that. It's just a var that got passed in there. It's a copy of a palette. There's no way you can $sign it. You have to $sign states, observed objects, things like that. Let's go see if this works. Here we go. COVID. Woohoo! It's the editing UI for COVID. And we can put some more COVID train, I guess. Oh, and sorry, interesting about this too, we go here to COVID, you can see that we added our train there. Let's add another one, the COVID Vespa. We can still navigate back. We don't have to exit or anything like that. We can navigate around. And it always is remembering what's going on because we're changing it in the model. Now, what about this new opening this up automatically? That requires a little different navigation destination. So here's another form of navigation destination. And this one is, instead of saying navigation destination for, you're going to say navigation destination is presented, and you have to give it a binding. I'll call this one show, we'll show the cursor palette. If we just created a new one, it'll be added at the cursor, so we'll show a cursor palette when we do this. And this is also the palette editor showing, but instead of the index here, this is the store's cursor index. So if I set a Boolean, which I haven't created yet, called show cursor palette, it's going to navigate to the cursor palette, the editor for the cursor index. So let's give ourselves that little @state private var show cursor palette equals false. And so that's an @state, so we can pass a binding to it. And then when we create a new palette down here, we'll just say show cursor palette equals true, and it will navigate to that. Let's delete this one so we're not confused. Ready? Plus, there it is. It navigates to it. We can say, I don't know, green this time. Go down here, add some green emojis. That green looks green. That's got some green in it. Some green. There we go back, and there it is, green at the top. That's all I wanted to show you for that stuff. The last thing I want to show you, we're short on time, so I'm going to run just a little over, is when you're on an iPad, you can have more space. So you don't necessarily need your navigation to always be replacing what you're seeing with something else. You could actually have multiple things showing. We saw that in settings. Remember in settings, there was a column on the left and we click on it, and then on the right, we were navigating over there, but we could have 2 or possibly even 3 columns. So how does that work? And for this one, just to make this go a little faster, I'm going to create one of these multi-pane things and put it as our content view, so I don't have to always keep going back and choosing this little list thing down here. I don't want to have to keep going back here and hitting list. So I'm just going to replace my whole emoji art with that. Let's go back here, create this thing first. New file. It's a view. I'm going to call this one my palette manager. And what the palette manager is going to do, it's going to manage all the palettes in all the stores. Not just our main palette, this bit got injected down, but it's going to manage all the palettes in all the stores. So here's our palette manager, and I'm going to start right off the bat showing you how this works with navigation here. Instead of using navigation stack, you're going to use something called navigation split view. And navigation split view has an extra little thing here, which is a second pane. And it can actually have a third pane, which I'm going to do in a second. But I'm going to start here by just having all my stores in the left pane, and then the palettes that are in that store on the right. The store on the left, click up store, boom, you see the palettes in it. Let's, like I said, go back to my emoji art app. Instead of showing my emoji art document view here, I'm going to show this palette manager instead. And I can even run this like this and give you an idea of what these things generally looks like. It's a little hard to see, but to see this very thin gray line right here. So this is the left side, and this is the right side, and we don't have anything in either side, so they're blank. Notice there's a little button in the upper left that hides the left side. The gray line disappeared if you can't see it, and this brings it back. So this is a 2-pane version of this. In the left pane, I'm going to put a bunch of stores. So let's go ahead and do that. Go back to my palette manager and add a let stores be an array of palette stores. I'm going to show these array of palette stores in my left pane. List stores, store in. Now I want to say store.name, but this is bad. Why is this bad? It's because this store that we want to show the name of is not held in an @observed object in our palette manager. It was passed to us in an array of stores. We want to be disciplined about only accessing the vars of an observable object from a var that is marked @observed object or @environment object. If we don't, then we won't get the @observed object behavior, which is that when one of our @observed objects published vars change, our view might have to redraw itself. Of course, it's not really a problem here because the palette store's name is not even @published, and in fact, it's a constant let. But it's still bad form to access an observable object's vars from a var that is not marked @observed object. Now the fix here is to just create another view, maybe we'll call it palette store view, and pass this store into an @observed object var in that view, and then it can show the name. We're pressed for time here, so I'm not going to do that, but I'll put it in the code that I post for this after lecture, so check that out. Notice that when I put the stores in a list like that, it says, oh, well, wait a second, you're putting that essentially in a for each. Those things have to be identifiable. So we have to go back to our palette store over here, and we have to make it be identifiable. This might seem kind of weird because this is a view model. I'm putting a view model in a list, but there's nothing wrong with that. I can do that. Also notice that I said identifiable, it's not complaining. Classes are identifiable by the pointer to them. So if you say class is identifiable, it's identifiable. I actually don't want this behavior because I can create two palette stores with the same name. They're both writing into the same user defaults place. They'll be the same palette store. They will be writing and sharing each other's data. So identifiable for a palette store really is var ID, a string, which is my name. That's what identifies me as a palette store. Because I store all my data into one database, multiple versions of me with the same name would be the same thing. So that's a little different there. Back to our palette manager here. So that fixes that little store thing. Now what about the detail here? I'm going to just for now say choose a store because I want the person to choose a store in the left pane, and then I'll show them the store in the right pane. So for now, we're going to say that. And then also this palette manager here, let's just not have a preview, but I could easily make a preview. And the other thing is I have an argument here to my palette manager, so let's provide that. We have my palette manager, stores. We'll put our palette store, which is the thing we inject. Let's make a couple more. Store 2, store 3. I'll call this one my alternate store. We'll call this one maybe my special store or something, but they're different stores. We'll pass them in so we have multiple stores to choose from, store 2 and store 3. All right, let's go see what that looks like. All right, there we go. Left side, you see, we have our stores. And what we want is when we tap on one of these, show me the palette in that store. So how do we make that happen? Well, we could actually make that happen with navigation links and navigation destination. Just the same way we do in Stack, it works exactly the same. We could go in here and put around this text store name, navigation link with the store thing, and then navigation destination. But I'm going to show you a different way to do it. I'm going to keep track of the selection in that list, and then based on the selection, I'm going to pick the thing in the detail. So how do I keep track of a selection in a list? And this is valuable anytime you have a list, not just in this case where you're in a split view. It's really easy. You just say selection, and you have to provide a binding to something that can identify that selection. So I'm going to call this the selected store, and I'll put a little @state up here, private var selected store, palette store, question mark. And it has to be question mark if you allow nothing to be selected, which I'm going to allow. But if you don't allow nothing to be selected, then you make it not question mark, but then you're going to have to give it a starting value also, because it can never not be selected in that case. Now we're seeing another error here that says referencing that requires that palette store has to be hashable, as you can imagine. Again, same kind of problem we had before. So let's make palette store hashable. I'm going to do this in an extension. Let's do it at the top here so you can see it. Instead of just putting hashable on here, I'm going to put it in an extension to palette store that makes it hashable. And I'm doing this because I want to emphasize that you can add protocol conformance in an extension. You don't have to put it in the main struct. You can add it in an extension. Now, notice that it says palette store does not conform to equatable. I typed hashable. Why is it saying equatable? Well, hashable depends on equatable. So let's do equatable first because we're very familiar with that. And when we say that, we can do our little fix here. Here's our protocol stub for equatable. And for us, two palette stores are the same if their name is the same. Everybody agree with that? So now we have equatable. Let's go to hashable. We're going to have a problem here, as you'll see. It says palette store does not conform to hashable. All right, we'll just fix Oh, there's no fix. I can't fix. Unfortunately, Hashable, it doesn't know how to add that protocol stub. I'm not 100% sure why. So you're just going to have to type it. The name of the function is hash, okay, hash into. And the way you do hashing is you just take this hasher that's given to you and you combine all your vars that you want to be part of your hash, right? Your hash value. Here, just our name in this case. I'm not going to talk about this hashing. You can look in the documentation. This in out just means that the hasher is given to you, you hash it up, and then it comes back out on the in out. Don't worry about it too much. All right, so we got our hashable there. But this selected store, how does it get associated with the views? Because all I have in there is text store.name. Well, you need to add something here called .tag. And the tag is the thing that gets stored in here. So they have to match, they have to be the same type or they won't get in there, and vice versa. If you set this selected store, then the view with that tag will get selected. So don't forget tags when you're doing selection in a list. So selection in a list is create an @ state, add this selection with a binding to it, and then put the tags for each view that will store the value in here. Let's see what happens here. Now we can select, you see, we know which one of these three things is selected. And since we know which is selected, now we can draw the right palette editor. Here we can pick the right palette editor. So I'm just going to say, if I can let the selected store, in other words, something is selected here, then let's go ahead and put one of our editable palette lists where the store is that selected store. Now, unfortunately, when we made editable palette list here, we injected the store into it. Remember this? Palette list, editable palette list. Oh, it's injection mode. So this has to go back to be not injection mode. And that's going to cause us to have to go back to the palette chooser over here and pass the store to it, which is fine. It will just pass it the one that was injected into us. So sometimes that injection, not really what you want. I'm going to have to go back and do it. It makes sense here. Run. Main. Woohoo! There's our editable palette list with the things in that store. Go here. We can still do all the things that we could do before here. And if I delete something, let's say, let's get rid of blue and go over to alternate and go back to main, no blue. Right, so it's keeping track of them separately. What about the third pane? Because it would be really nice if when I clicked here, instead of replacing this whole pane, it added a third pane. So that I had three things, the store, the palette, and the editing. How do I do a third pane? Go back here to our palette manager and add another little intermediate thing here, content, but I actually want this one right here to be the content, that's the middle pane. And the detail, which I guess by default we'll have it be choose a palette. This detail, I'm not going to do that one with selection. I'm going to do that one with navigation links and navigation destination. In fact, the navigation destinations I already put in will just work except for one thing. Watch what happens if I do this. Go here, got three panes. You see that? The stores, the pals thing. Okay, I'll pick this one and I'll pick this. Oh no, why is it navigating like this inside here instead of just using this beautiful third thing it has? The reason for that is that in editable palette list right here, we have a navigation stack. Since we have a navigation stack there, the navigation link and the navigation destination in there are always going to use that stack. So we can reuse this entire view, but we can't wrap it in a stack if we want it to use the split view. You see the problem? This is a good thing because sometimes when you're building that three pane thing, you do want one of the panes to go in its own little stack, and sometimes you don't. But in this case, we don't. So I'm going to remove the navigation stack here at this level, just take it completely out of here, which, by the way, if I remove this navigation stack here back in my palette chooser, I'm going to have to put it back here. Otherwise, this one's not going to work because none of its navigation works if it's not in a navigation stack. But I did this because I wanted to show you that the navigation stack can be at a very high level. It doesn't have to be where the navigation links are. So it can be at this top level. And this frees up our navigation split view so that the navigation will work inside it. So we go here, go main, we click here, and now it can use this third pane instead of doing navigation stack on top of itself. The last thing I want to show you is this problem. Watch this COVID. You see the selected COVID in the middle range? I'm going to press spacebar. It deselected COVID. Why did it deselect COVID? And if I hit backspace, oh, it reselected it. The reason for that is that the navigation links in here are linked to the palette, not the palette ID, but the palette. So when I say COVID space, it's a different palette. Okay, it got changed to a different palette, a palette whose name is COVID space instead of COVID. So how can I keep that selection in the middle one? Well, all I need to do is have my navigation link be looking at the ID instead of looking at the palette. That's really easy. We'll go back here to our editable palette list right here. And right now, the value that we look for in our link is this palette. Well, I'm just going to have it linked to the ID of the palette. And then down here, instead of doing a destination for the palette, I'm doing a palette ID. This becomes a palette ID. And here, instead of looking up palette ID, I'm going to say palette ID. So this value that you link each of the things in your list to doesn't always have to be the thing you're actually showing. It could be the ID of that thing. And the great thing about an ID is, of course, it doesn't change. Even if you change the name or the emojis of something, it's the same. So here we go, main, travel in this case, we'll go up here, space, you see? I'm typing, it's changing it, but it's still selected because it's selecting it by ID. The navigation link is the ID. And that is all we have time for today. So I will see you all next Monday.